Uh, yeah, John, I was just talking about the federal government threw me a curveball recently, and it was something that was very disconcerting. So anyway, it's now that we're live, I'm going to not. I'll talk about it some other time. I don't mind sharing. I just don't want to do it on YouTube live. Welcome. This is the Here to There show. I'm Luc Bouchard, your host. I'm very excited about you guys you joining us today. This is our 15th 14th or 15th, 13th or 14th Here to There show. You think I would know that more than it is, but I don't. And today I'm going to be interviewing Shoumo, and Shoumo, I'm not even going to try Ganguly. You see,
Ganguly.
Ganguly. Okay.
Yeah.
And let me put us on speaker view. We're going there and view, speaker view. Okay. So you are our guest speaker for Friday for Widen Your Gaze, and your topic on Friday is the laws of business. I can't remember what we came up with. It was. Do you recall?
No, that's close enough.
That's close enough. The laws of business. Yeah, and before we talk about that, we're just going to just do what I normally do and just ask you some questions and whatnot. And you were saying that you live in the United States and you're in New Jersey and
New Jersey. In Woodbridge Township, New Jersey.
How big is Woodbridge?
Woodbridge has about 100,000 people.
Oh, okay.
The Woodbridge Township. So the township is New Jersey has about 240 or 220 of these townships, which are not really cities. And the way it is incorporated is there are 10 towns and there's one local government, which is a township government, so 10 zip codes. And Woodbridge is a town in the Woodbridge Township. So people refer to it as Woodbridge proper.
Woodbridge proper.
Then there are the forts and stuff like that. And so if you look up the phrase the Woodbridge model, you will there is someone who had written about was using Woodbridge as an illustration of how local governments could cut costs and stuff like that. So it's an interesting town.
And why Woodbridge? Of all the places you could live, like, is there something specifically about that?
So I between 2010, or rather 11 and 14, I relocated 4 times in those 4 years.
One four.
4 times in 4 years.
Oh, I didn't know if you said 14 or 40. So 4 times in 4. Okay, one every year.
Once a year. And I went from Jersey to Florida to Jersey to Illinois to Jersey. So I was working for a company called Cognizant Technologies. That's like an outsourcing firm.
Okay.
They were headquartered in Teaneck, but now they have shifted to College Station, Texas, and their world headquarters is in Teaneck now. So my last, that's when I quit them in 2014, and my last client was Prudential in Woodbridge. So I was assigned to Prudential. That's how I ended up in Woodbridge.
Okay, and you're but it's not just you. You have a family. You have
me and my wife. We live here. My mother and a lot of my relatives are in India, in Calcutta.
Okay. Now, that's a lot of moving. How did you not get divorced?
So I have been blessed with a very supportive wife, and I have put her through this for a long time. We got married in 94, February 94. So the first time, and I was in Calcutta at that time. So the first time I visited the United States, the city was Philly, and that was 96. But I came along alone, and I used to work for Pricewaterhouse at that time.
Okay.
So 99 was when me and my wife came here for the first time. That was Philly too. So between 2000 2000, 99 and 2008, there were about four visits I made to the for 3 months, 4 months, and stuff, and then have been living here. But even when I was in India, I was based out of Calcutta,
Yep.
and the it so happened is for most of the time in India, I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and when we got acquired by IBM, it was IBM Business Consulting, and a lot of my assignments were outside of Calcutta. So we have been moving, like we have. So even though my payroll came from a location like Calcutta was the location of my payroll for a while, I have been out of the city since 99. Yeah, since 99. And so between 99 and 2008, I was all over the map in India and the US. And even when I was back, when I was in the US, between I went through a lot of those migrations within the
Right.
country.
Um, it must have taken its toll in some way or another. All that moving and all that.
It has been taxing. It has been, but it has also been enriching. For quite a while, I couldn't buy a book because I would always have to think now, if I buy this, where would I keep it? Right.
Sorry, that's just,
So,
that's not the
so
first thing I think of when you
right,
contemplate literature.
correct, right. Like or anything. Like if you buy something, if you get something which is not a digital thing, then where do you keep it? Because you're already always on the move,
Right.
and you feel like those. Like if you there was this movie Water for the Elephants, where it was based out, it was a like a circus troupe moving
Okay.
from town to town, and they moved in a train. But that itself was a huge infrastructure. Like for me, it was literally living out of suitcases for years and years. And 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 my wife put up with it, like what we want, like at least we were together, and we didn't have a long distance marriage. So that's what we were like, we counted our blessings, and
Does she
we
have a
somehow.
sister? Does she have a sister?
She is one of four siblings,
Okay.
and I don't have siblings at all.
Okay.
So
I'm just
so
thinking
it
of a
has.
woman that understanding. Maybe I should see if she has a single sister. And so we
Uh,
have you have been on the you have been a guest speaker before on Widen Your Gaze, and that was before I was doing this installment of that. And something that you had shared with me is that you had to do a bit of a career adjustment because of there was you were told that you needed to focus differently. Do you mind talking about that or
right. I was prescribed a change in career.
yeah,
I was prescribed a change in job by my physician in 2013, and that was the third in those 4 years of or four. The and the way it came about was somewhere around, I think, 2003, 2005. I realized that, like, my purpose in life had become making anonymous rich shareholders richer,
right,
and where that does not, like, when it does not sit very well if you want your life to mean something, like beyond just earning a pay and all of that, which in itself is I don't, if someone has that, like, has that focus, I wouldn't say that that's good or bad. It somehow didn't, I felt that there was a lot that I could be doing or should be doing. uh, so one of the moves, I made a move which seemed to be a nice, thoughtful, like wise, whatever move, because the world was moving towards outsourcing. And I in 2005 I moved to Cognizant, which was a outsourcing firm. The difference between Cognizant and a lot of the other outsourcing firms were that like this was an American company with a strong presence in India rather than the other way around.
Okay.
And it is like they claim it was an offshoot to Dun and Bradstreet, and by that they claimed a lineage to Abraham Lincoln and whatnot. So,
Okay.
so, but like I felt that the culture was different from other outsourcing organizations, which were basically salt mines. But when I joined, I felt that like I was speaking a very different language in a mass of people who had a very different outlook to life. And for 9 years, essentially, I was like a bird trying to swim.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it was like it went from like bad to worse to like when you thought like it couldn't get worse, it did. And 2013 was when every fiber of my being was saying that this is not for me. But at the same time, I didn't have the courage to just do something else. Like, how do I survive? So the first thing had happened in 2010 when I had to make a few different difficult choices, but I chose to stick along with Cognizant. So things got progressively worse from 2010.
Mm.
So 2013 is when like it was my doctors made that statement. And by middle of 2014, I knew that I had to move, but I didn't know where to. 2014 September, I thought let me move out of Cognizant. At that time, Cognizant had about 150,000 odd people. Like
Mm.
that was the workforce strength of the organization at that time. So quite a large organization, earning around 150 to 170K with bonus and stuff, which was uh, which was a cushion which was difficult to move out of.
I
Um,
bet.
so I
I bet.
so I joined another firm which I thought would be a smaller firm and would sort of let me ease off into a different type of a work environment and lifestyle. But that again, I realized I had picked up a job which I had outgrown, like mentally outgrown. And so by the end of 2014, I just had to cut everything and jump into. I call it most of the time like I have the bridge of faith analogy. So like
What?
Indiana
What?
Jones, the bridge of faith
Oh,
uh,
Bridge of Fen. Oh, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah,
analogy
yeah, yeah.
where Indiana Jones steps out into that chasm
Yep.
and hope that the bridge will materialize.
Right.
So I made that sort of I stepped out, and I have been holding on since then. So
Pardon me. So I'm curious about. So we can say that there's, from your career and from a career point of view, there was the corporate, and then in the last couple of years, in the span of your career, it's relatively short what you're doing now compared to what you've done before on that. But that transition, um, when you made the decision, it wasn't there. When did you start? When did that discontentment start? Was it always there? Was it did something happen that just kind of exacerbated it, and saying this isn't for me? Like was it unease? Was it dreading going to work? Like what told you that that wasn't a good fit? That you didn't want to work for the faceless, soulless person to make them more money?
if I think back, like I went to the grade school I went to, high school that I went to. This was a town about 200 kilometers, so 160 odd miles from Calcutta. Um, I was taught by Christian brothers from Dublin, which was an unusual thing for me over there. And there was this. So my whole upbringing and environment was a lot different from the context. And I don't know whether it was like ingrained into my, whether it was nature or nurture,
Yep.
but I have been inquisitive, curious, looking out for other stuff all throughout my life. So where that reflected in the so out of high school, I went to study statistics. From there, I went to study accounting. From there, I went into um, consulting in both management consulting, and because of my and a bit of software, and which was this was a mix which sort of stayed throughout my life. So initially, so I have been in the business environment since '84, but my serious job, like what I consider as a job, or in consulting, I went into consulting in say '91. So around that, when I started off over there, it was all about solving problems, right? And then it became solving problems for people. And when I was solving problems for people, I had this whole thing that, okay, I was making a change in the life of these people. And then it became less about the problem and the people, and more about the whether the billing was happening, whether the project was profitable enough, and stuff like that, like which we would call as management stuff, right?
So my but so did the hi Deb, by the way. did the uh did the train of business change, or is there is a different focus, or it just became what?
So I think the acquisition of PwC by IBM was like a catalyst. And
Okay.
at that time, I was managing a implementation project for Toyota in India, and most of the people from my team went into another project. And while this acquisition happened, we went into and we signed up a lot of contracts, which were like in that which could be labeled as priced to win. So we 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 made sure the price was such that the client would offer us the whole thing. It did not bear like the but the effort which would go in were underestimated. So which
Oh,
meant that from day one, the people in the projects would have to. So this team, which was working with me at Toyota, went into a project. They started working for 12 hours a day right from the first day, and it peaked to around like 18 hours a day.
oh my
And
God.
if in a period of 4 months, that's what they keep on doing. And at the end of that project, you would feel that, okay, so the team was not happy. The And since they logged those hours in the IBM system, the project was flagged as a loss. So a lot of these type of things happened, and so one would think that, okay, at the end of the day, therefore, we perhaps made a difference because we implemented systems which would make the lives of the people easier. And then that company got acquired by IBM, and it was a PeopleSoft system. And IBM said that, you know what, this system is going to be sunset in 6 months because we don't want to make like pay Oracle license fees.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, that whole team had been like working their tail off to just make the shareholders of that company, which got sold off to IBM, and therefore they were already rich shareholders, the
Right.
promoters of the company. uh, they're like, they were slogging off, they were sacrificing their life for what? To make this person who was already a rich business person a richer business person. Like that's what we were at the end of the day doing. um, so those, like I was talking about being out of town and then
Yeah.
traveling in a suitcase, putting my wife and therefore the families of all the other consultants, my teammates, through that lifestyle. And for what? Like, yes, there would be money coming into our bank accounts, but we wouldn't be able to enjoy the life that one would suppose that you would have with it. So that's where this whole realization settled in, and it only became like, with each passing week, month, day, year, whatever you call it, it sort of became, uh, from just a gnawing thought to, this is not worth it. Like, and then
Yeah.
when people don't, like, you don't, like, they don't pay the basic human to human dignity when it gets lost. uh, that's when you just say that no, this is not where I belong.
Right. Right. And I suspect no amount of money would have made that okay for you.
Correct.
Yeah, because that wasn't bad coin even back then, right? That was pretty good money
Right,
compared.
right,
Yeah, on
right.
that. Yeah, yeah,
And
and
I'm
there,
still
there.
living off of my savings from the from that
Yeah.
time.
It's good that that has had some more residual payoff and longer payoff for you on that. Um, so so where do you get meaning and purpose in your work?
So there are, like, essentially, it's all about making sure uh, that the people, like, and my goals and your goals and anyone else's goals would be different. Like, what one person would say as success or growth would be different from another person's success or growth, right? But any business owner would have his or her own definition of it. And in order to, like, fulfill that, a lot of them are would be going through a lot of anxiety, and because the world is uncertain, and it is more uncertain, more so even nowadays. So if I feel that whatever I'm doing takes away some portion of that anxiety, and gets them to be more focused, or have a better quality of life, that's what gives me a kick. That's what uh, would make me feel that yes, we
That's feeding
have.
your soul. That's feeding your
Right,
soul,
right,
right on that.
right. It might be
Uh,
vanity, but that's what
yeah,
it is.
right. So so you're called to a higher purpose to ease people's confusion and troubles.
Make things simple, right?
That makes things simple on
Troubles
that.
and simple.
Okay. Uh, so I remember you telling me before, you mentioned IBM and Price Waterhouse. I want to go back to what was you worked for IBM for a while and you had a bit of a unique position, if I recall, about you were,
Right, right.
yeah,
So in my PricewaterhouseCoopers days, I was a practice manager. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, the levels, PricewaterhouseCoopers was considered to be a transnational company, not a multinational firm, like, which meant that each country unit is sort of on its own, and at par with others, provided that they so there were some legal and whatever structure. So and the career structure was that you had levels 1 through 6 and the partners.
yep,
Partners own the firm. Partners were chosen from level 5. So when so I was at level 5 in that structure. Um, so that it was called a GCF. Whatever structure it was, it got fitted into IBM, and when the dust settled down, even in the IBM world, when the transition happened. So it was like a fairly senior type of a role over there. In IBM, the structure was, the way things happened was a bit different. There were all these bands and stuff, and 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 uh, and there were these, the way you have, like, you might have national roles in IBM. You could have business unit roles, and you could have regional roles, and stuff. So at one point, for a few months, I had a regional role in IBM, which was ASEAN SA, which is South Asia, Middle East, and ASEAN, which included about 5 countries: Singapore, Malaysia, that area, Philippines, and
That was your footprint.
that
That
was the
was
footprint. And I had a role of what was called a competency leader of a business solutions group. So it was a resource pool of PeopleSoft consultants.
okay.
Um, I was also trained for what was called a method exponent. A method exponent is a person who comes in at the time of a bid being a proposal,
Hmm.
make sure that the proposal is structured as per the methodology, as per IBM established methodology, and then again comes in at the time when if when the project manager takes in the project from the bid team and helps the project manager too. So I, because of my comfort with a structured way of working and stuff like that, and then methodology, so uh, I was trained to be a method exponent. That was
Right, but those were few and far between in IBM. Is that not correct?
yes. So there would be, and these were typically regional roles,
Okay.
which for a competency for a region. So wouldn't be too many of these type of roles.
Right, right. And do you get much recognition for those roles? Do people understand when they see on a resume or what you bring to your CV the significance of that regional role?
So within the IBM framework, people would understand that very well. So IBM is an organization which has, when you see a title on the business card, most likely that's a title. If you're not an IBMer and if you're given a business card,
Right,
that business card carries a title which is a outward facing business card.
right.
Uh,
Which
for
means it's
within
showing
the
it's that's showing to everyone else.
else.
Right.
But when it's an IBMer to IBMer, they
Yeah.
often carry a separate business card,
Really?
which tells the other where they are in the respective picking orders. So they may not carry the business card as a physical thing, but definitely they have. So to the outside world, it might be a VP or whoever.
Yeah.
But to an IBMer, they would first ask what's the band of the person,
Yeah.
and if the person is an IBM executive, then what's an executive band of that person. So IBM has bands 1 through 10,
Yeah.
and for all professional people, the entry level is definitely mostly band 6,
Mm.
and then it becomes like band D, C, B, A, and then generality and people are beyond that banding type of a thing. So it's a very interesting world,
Right.
um, and it's a very bureaucratic world. And I would
I could guess.
right. And when I was in India, I used to say like government of in IBM province of India.
Oh.
but
Right. Right.
but you have to also hand it to that, like that's an organization that churns out Nobel laureates, like people who people have won the Nobel Prize because of the work they have, because of their research uh, in IBM, for IBM. So which
Right.
is, you can't really say that for too many other
That's
organizations.
true. That's true. And they are like one of the giants on the planet.
Mhm.
I had a job for over 3 years. It was a consultant role where I was, and you've probably heard me talk about this, but where I was a consultant on best practices for laying people off. And what would happen is that so a company has decided that they needed to get rid of some staff, or and not for cause. There's no cause here. They have no reason. There's either a contraction of the business where they have to get rid of some positions, or they have decided that there's a the price of oil has gone down, so we have to get rid of a whole bunch of departments and whatnot. And I worked for this company, and what was really curious about it is that, and there was parts of, when there's a Canadian company called Husky. They're owned by they're sorry. There's a Canadian company that's called Husky. It started in Canada. actually in Alberta, eventually got bought out by the Chinese. And in this would have been 4 or 5 years ago, there was a downturn of oil again, and they basically, I don't know how many hundreds, I don't think it was thousands, but hundreds of people they laid off. And my job was to actually go go in and give best practices to the person that's laying the people off, and also the HR person there. The HR person had the experience, but usually the hiring leader who had to, or the leader who had to lay the person off, didn't have the experience. So my job was to go in and basically make sure that everything was taken care of, that they had thought of stuff. I'm not talking about the legal paperwork, I'm just talking about the process. And I've said often, there's no good way to show someone the door, but there's many bad ways to show someone the door. And the idea was to get that person as home as fast as possible so they could decompress. You didn't want them to be in an environment any longer. And it was a brutal, and it was often kind of like, it was the person like flat shock and awe. They would just go from one thing to another thing. Anyway, what I discovered in this process, or let me actually give a bit more information. So what would happen is we generally show up first thing in the morning, and we're talking like 6 o'clock in the morning. We wanted to be one of the first ones. Our team wanted to be the first ones in. So someone from HR would meet us in this, this was in Calgary, Alberta. So it would often happen here, but you would be in this high rise, 20, 34 story high rise that was corporate, and you'd meet the HR person, and you'd be whisked to a floor that the public doesn't go to. It's only for the people that work there. This is behind the scenes. And what would happen is as you'd walk down the hallway, you'd see the corporate vision, their mission statement, all this kind of information about what they believe to that constant reminder to the employees about what they're supposed to be doing. And I often found it very interesting as to how they let people go and how that coincided with their vision and mission statement, especially if the company was saying that they really care about their employees. And if a country can be judged on how it treats its vulnerable populations, such as children and elderly, I think a company can be judged on how it shows someone the door. And that's really speaks to their values and whatnot on that. So it was a good snapshot to see what the corporation, what they said and what they did. And so this leads me to my question about, you've worked with Price Waterhouse, you've worked with IBM, you've worked with, the big corporations. Are all the corporations the same? Or are they like, if generally, like when you boil everything away, it's still a corporation? Or is there a life and soul to different corporations?
So that's an interesting question. The for In all these, like, there's a one organization that I don't speak about when a lot, because I spent only 4 months in them with them. That's SAP. I was with SAP Consulting Division, and I moved into SAP from a PwC job, and then after 4 months I rejoined PricewaterhouseCoopers. What I realized is that, like, um, in PwC, most likely, I don't know how you would categorize a PricewaterhouseCoopers as a firm, and that means PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst and Young, KPMG, or Deloitte, but those are largely partnership organizations. To the external world, it might look as a corporation,
Yeah.
but they are not. It's a very different culture, and the partners, once they, like, the partners are chosen so that they fit in with the firm's and ethos,
The partners are chosen to fit within the culture. Okay.
culture,
Yeah, that
and
makes
and
sense. That's like
and
hiring. Yeah.
when and a lot of times the partners come up through the ranks, right?
Yeah.
um, and So once they are chosen, their workforce, they build up their workforce as per their understanding, or so it very, like, it closely emulates the ethics of the partner leading that unit,
So
right?
the lead sets the tone for everyone else.
Sets the tone for everyone
Okay.
else.
Okay.
And I found that even in an organization like Cognizant, where even though it's a say a US corporation backed up with a lot of um, legal entities all over the world, including most of the workforce being in India, but it was a collection of little fiefdoms within the organization. So even though there was this, the whole purpose of all outsourcing firms almost has been like the genesis was Y2K. That's how, and all the investments around that time led to the sudden growth of all these outsourcing firms, though
Okay.
the concept of outsourcing started off in 96, 97. But it's a very transactional type of an organization.
What do you mean? The concept of outsourcing started in 96, 97? It wasn't around before then?
It wasn't really thought of as
A
like
standard practice, a standard
a
business
standard
practice.
practice, or a like cost. So it was a cost arbitration mechanism, right? To cut down the cost, you, in order to add economies of scale, you shift a lot of operations to a back office unit, or one unit which can serve a lot of other people. Therefore, so any organization which is labor intensive, like and we don't think of software industries as labor intensive, but at the end of the day, it is the people are the main assets of an organization like that. So again, to not to divert too much too far away, what I found in IBM was a very different type of a culture. Um, and I guess GE would be similar, and there would be some other organizations which would be similar. And and I I have a like I have also interacted in my life as with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I have also interacted with a lot of clients
Hmm.
in different sectors. So a Toyota, or or like a retail. So the industry also has an effect on the culture of the organization. So if you're in the retail industry, you're working with very thin margins, right?
Right.
And if you're working with very thin margins, you're always counting your pennies.
Right.
Like it is more of cost savings and adding that profitability than the value and stuff, like, because you're working more of commodity. And if you are working for a different organization, so that also has a way of bleeding into the way people interact with each other, like how cutthroat they are, and
Right.
how
Right.
much
It's
of.
yeah. It'd be like a brand dealership, Mercedes versus a used car dealership.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Correct.
there's going to be, yeah, one has a lot more margin, so that you have a lot, you can attract better talent, you can people with more experience, and it's a spiral up. As the other, it's a bit of a spiral down.
Yeah,
And
I don't think of it as attracting more talent or whatever. It is more like who would survive in that environment. Like
huh,
because it's almost like a natural selection process of people who don't fit into that get weeded out because they won't survive the pressures of what
right, and
the.
it's like on sales team, the lowest salesperson gets fired,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Which would not be a lot of fun. So
Correct.
here's actually a question it never thought to me. It just recently came back onto my radar recently. Uh, do you have any thoughts on Union Carbide?
No, I there was this again. I was in India at that time. The Bhopal gas tragedy and stuff like that happened.
Yeah.
And but before I go there, like we were talking about letting go of people, right? Like,
Okay.
so
Yep.
I would say that like there were the if like if it is a large organization, if it is like a corporate or a semi-corporate type of an organization, then you could always find a role for a particular person. if the person is considered valuable to the organization. Like there would always be like I was in a situation where there was this consultant in my cognizant days who her manager did not like, her clients were complaining about. She was very unhappy in whatever she was doing. But like and there was some other project that I was pilot project that I was doing, and then there was some data points which helped me realize this. But what I was able to do is find her another part of the organization, and this was like instructional design. And when she moved to that part of the business, uh, it was a very different experience that she had. Like her manager was happy, her client was happy. So and that's what I feel, that if an organization, like if there are sufficient variety of jobs, if it is not a homogeneous monolith type of an organization, then they might be able to find jobs for employees whom they consider valuable. Like what they consider valuable is a very different question.
That's certainly
But
true. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Well,
like
but it's a
you
culture. It's a culture of recognizing that we've got good people. We have an investment by hiring them. We have investment of onboarding them on that. Why throw that all away because they're not a good fit here? But you must have
right.
advocated for her because I'm sure people wanted to fire her.
Right, and if I wasn't there, she wouldn't have been able to
Right.
organize, continue in that organization. So, so when people were letting go of people, like when businesses were letting go of people because of COVID or whatever other situation, I was telling some people that, like, look, actually the decision is not whom you let go, but the decision should be whom you retain. Like that would make sure that you retain the best of your workforce throughout this process. And if you don't have the money, what can you do? You have to let go of people. But if you do have a PPP or whatever, and you have to decide whom to let go, make that decision be whom you want to retain.
Right. Right.
It's a
It's
very
funny you should
different
mention.
decision.
It is a very different decision, and and I don't know about the United States, but here in Canada, I think there's a certain part of the population that thinks that if you have a job, you're not you're kind of secure as long as that job's needed, and there's constant companies are not employment agencies. they're not here to employ people. They need to hire employ people, but just the sake. And so this concept of being able to terminate a position, and of course in Canada you have to pay. There is severance that you need to pay, and depends on how long they've been with you and that kind of stuff, right? You can't just. I know there's some states, United States, that no cause you can just get rid of people, which is bizarre, quite frankly, to my way of thinking, because that's not how we have it here in Canada at all. Different culture. But when I was doing the layoffs, and there was, if you had to make a choice of we have to get rid of 3 positions out of 10, well, of course, the people that were the most pain in the ass were the ones that gone first, right? And there was no that you didn't have to justify it. We're getting rid of 3 people, and this is just the decision on that and on that. And so there was one story. There was a maintenance manager. uh, he was not surprised. He actually saw it coming because his office was empty. The truck that he used was empty with all his personal belongings. And as I'm doing, we do the layoff. I walk him to his vehicle just to make sure there's nothing there that he needs. And he's talking about all the golf he plays, and we have a very short golf season here, right? And this was here in Canada, and he played an exorbitant amount of golf for being fully employed. And so he told me that, whatever. And I reflected this to the decision maker that decided to let him go, lay him off. I said, yeah, he played a crazy amount of golf last year. It's like 40 rounds or something. He goes, yeah, because he was never here. He was never doing his job. He was always there. So, no surprise that he was the first to go on that. And I think that, you know, you always have to be mindful of what you leave in your wake. And who you piss off and don't and whatnot. And I have a very good friend, uh, who was he he's an electrical engineer. And sorry, I just want to see who's calling. He's an electrical engineer. He went into a new network business group, and it was totally different what he's experienced from his previous role. And he really struggled with how to handle that, whatnot. So yeah, a working group can be a very different culture within, right? You've probably seen that. There's very different cultures within cultures, enculturations. Have you ever had to
I
deal with
have.
that? Have you ever
I
had to
have.
basically, yeah?
In Cognizant, my 2007, the business unit I was with had a change in leadership, and the incoming leadership was very, very different from the outgoing leadership,
Huh.
and the the experience is still raw.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, as we say,
And
we never leave a job. We leave a
correct, we'd leave a
right.
manager,
We leave a manager.
and and uh, and maybe I it was a very different set of people that I left than the set of people whom I joined. And there obviously it's not a very simple thing as to and how it happened. So the the uh, the story, like if you talk to 10 people, you would get 10 different versions,
Right. Of
and
course.
each person has his or her own different perspective. And it's so yes, I have had that. So it went from a very open to a very regimented, a very uniform, the chief has spoken type of a
Right.
environment. And and I have been a person who could spot, like I understood politics very well,
Hmm.
and I could see what was happening. At one point, before this whole transition, I also went on, like I had conversations with some people who were telling, like, above my pay grade, telling them, like, look, this is what's coming down the pike, this is
Right.
what I speculate is coming down the pipe. But I have not been comfortable in being a player, as they say, in the political game. So that was another source of sort of anxiety and heartburn for me, because I could see what was coming, because but I was not inclined to act on them.
Had
And
you been inclined to act, you probably wouldn't have had a career change, would have you?
right, I would be a different person then.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it would be, and everyone sort of, like, when I tell, like, in terms of like what people do in their life, and I know what they turn out to be. I knew that, like, when I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers, I was always advised to take some focus on certain things, which I didn't do. And I knew that, like, what was the consequence. I was And at some point I used to tell my people who used to come to me for advice and mentoring, I say that, look at me. I have worked myself into a position which I know I'm damn good at, but no one seems to there seems to not there doesn't seem to be enough of takers in the market for that skill. So what do you do? Like, you love doing that. Like, there's this that whole thing of the four circles, right? What you want to do, what
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to be paid for, like what people will pay for, what you are good at, and stuff like that. So um, you have to, but if you take some decisions, at least you should take them knowing what the consequences would be, and live life, and be okay with it when the consequences happen. And
And
don't
yeah,
say woe be
and
to me.
how it unfolds and how the dust settles on
Correct.
that.
Correct.
Yeah, and part of the thing with my friend who he went to this new work, what really was the problem? One of the things that he got himself painted into a corner was his perception that he couldn't actually leave to say I don't want to be in this working group. In this it was a corporation. It was like uh no, you take a new position, you're there for a year before you even consider leaving. And so he was so stuck with this that he couldn't act, he was actually thinking he had to quit because he was just there's no way out of this because I can't. And I said, and I knew he was well respected. I knew that he was seen as someone who was I pretty sure the company wouldn't want him to go. And I'm saying, and I said to him, that may be the rules, but what would they say if you left? And they said, why didn't you come talk to us? And that's what he ended up doing. And sure enough, it wasn't written in stone. It was on that, but his perception was is that he had to make it work on that. And he went from a very inclusive working group to they'll throw into the bus. And he was in meetings where everyone is saying to the lead, oh yeah, this will be done, and everyone at the table going, there's no freaking way this is going to get done. We're not going to get, but they couldn't say it, right? So he had this massive cognitive dissonance because how he usually worked and how he was working was just, and he was miserable. Like he was very, very miserable on that. We are coming up to the top of the hour. For Chris, were you here last week?
Yes, I was.
Okay, I can't remember which video I played, so you're gonna have to tell me right away if I'm playing the same video, because I always do a video in between, and just for you to know, there is a skeleton in it, so it's not a real skeleton, it's a plastic skeleton. But just if you have skeleton, if it's come out of the closet, and if there's a problem with that, so just let me know if it's going to be that, and we're going to probably do that now because it's a good breaking point.
Actually, I don't remember the video either, so.
But you'll see it. You'll probably remember it if you see it. So if not, we'll do it again a second time on this. This is the bare bones of Joseph Campbell. I don't think we did Joseph Campbell last week, so.
I don't think so.
Okay, so we're going to do this, and let me just get this ready. And while this plays, I'm just going to use the washroom really quick. So I'm going to actually turn off my screen. So share sound, videos. Nope, that's not what the one. Stop share. Okay, let's try this again. Move this here. And screen 3. Okay, let me try this again here. I'm not sure why it's not showing. Okay. And let's try this again. This is Bare Bones Videos, and I'm Luc Bouchard, and this is my co-host Phil, who happens to have a big old hammer with him. Phil, what's our quote for today? Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there were only walls. And that was by Joseph Campbell. Phil, your response is, heck, Phil, you're losing your mallet. Ah, Phil, what's a mallet with you? Phil's response to this is, what you do today is important because you're exchanging it for a day of your life. If you have a favorite quote, send it to us, and Phil will send you a picture of he and I mucking about. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm Luc Bouchard, and I really encourage you to find your own truth and live a free and glorious life. You take care. Another video coming up in 2 more days. Okay. These shenanigans were brought to you by a guy with too much time on his hand. Too much time on his hands. Look what happens. As I mentioned in the past, I did those videos, and that was God. Let me just see, when was that? 2016. So over 4 years ago, and it was a way of trying to get engagement and try and do something different on that. And so yeah, there's 72 of them. So okay, so let's yeah.
So the effect of dropping the hammer, that was a good effect of dropping the hammer.
Do you know how many shots it took me to set that up? for the skeleton to do that, it was like
Oh, that's really good. I was kind of wondering if it was really planned.
it was, yeah, it was, yeah,
Wow, that
yeah.
was good.
Thank you. Okay.
So
So
what did you like at that time, like 2016? Where you was it? It wasn't still bare bones. It wasn't bare bones communications yet, right?
no,
Like it
it was
was.
not. No, no. So what ended up happening was, and 7 years ago, I was 8 years ago, 7 years ago, I I was out of work. I was having a hard time finding work for the first time in my life, and I saw a life coach, and the I had 3 sessions with this life coach. I'm going, there actually, if she could do it, I could do it. And it's not because she wasn't skilled. It was because I am very skilled and my background and everything I bring. And I thought, and it was more of a consultation than actually going these big awarenesses I was looking for on that. So I decided on a whim to, because really, how hard could it be to run a business? Right, Shoumo? Can't be that hard. I'm skilled,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
So, so I said I got a business card, I got a company, I built a website, and it was a stark reality that I actually even had a business. I had an office that I was using. I wasn't paying for it because I was this was a business space that they needed more traffic in, so I knew the owner, so she let me use the space for free. And then about 7 months later, I went to California and did some training. It was with Brendan Bouchard, no relation. And at that point, it was impressed upon me that video is here and it's here to stay. And so I came home, I bought video gear, I bought lights, like sound, a microphone, all the stuff, and I started shooting content. And about 4 years into this, no, 3 years into it, then I had people knew I was shooting content and they started asking me how to shoot content. And I often heard at that point that if people are seeking out for your knowledge bait, you might have a niche. And so I then pivoted to bare bones video productions. And the reason I did bare bones video productions is because I already had Phil as bare bones videos, and it was kind of like, and what people say about me is my when I work with people, I cut right to the bone. I go down very, very, very quick. And so it was I was shooting this content, but it was really meant to try and engage people. And I've rebranded myself now probably 4 times, 5 times. And it's primarily because not only did I not know what I was doing, but it was this, I should be able to figure it out. I think I should be able to kind of, and I'll worry about those problems later. So that leads me to this wonderful stat we keep hearing about small businesses fail between 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years, something
Yeah,
is that
something
true?
like that. Like half the businesses fail
Yeah,
within the third to seventh or fifth to seventh year
yeah,
of their life.
yeah. And it was interesting because I made one of the earliest mistakes I made was being too in love with my product and thinking that, well, if I have a very clever name, people are just going to see. And my actual graphic artist said to me, "Are you sure you want to use this as a name?" Oh, yes, I do. The name was Sovereignty Actualized, and it was like, that's exactly what I did. Sovereignty is freedom from external control. Actualized is coming into being. That's what I did. But I spent more time describing what the name is than actually my services, and that's why I had to pivot. And so that was my biggest mistake, is thinking that I was going to have a great product people were going to come and see, and I've learned that. But I have actually had to pivot many times just to find work. And so let's talk about this false sense of security that people have when they actually literally just buy themselves a job, like at some regards. Is there a, in your experience working with business owners and entrepreneurs and consultants, is there a consistent theme that basically people are that you've seen a consistency across the board?
And this comes from my having been a consultant for a long, long time, right? And so when I was with in consulting, I used to pride myself for not prescribing before I understood what the need was. I have seen a lot of people come in with well, I have worked with so many people, so I know what you are going through.
So it's a cookie cutter
Uh,
approach, would you say?
yeah, cookie cutter approach and a very prescriptive approach, like prescribing solutions without without having a diagnosis of what the challenges are, right? Just because you are in retail does not always mean that you have five challenges, right? You might have those five challenges, but those challenges are contextual in the environment that you are in. If you are an attorney working for corporate, then you are, so if you are like a personal injury attorney, if you are working in a industrial belt, it would be very different from if you are working. So the
In the
and
white collar
therefore,
space, in the white collar space or
right,
something. Yeah,
in the
yeah,
white collar space.
yeah.
So the way you talk to them, the way you present your value to them would be different given where you are. And that's not something which is everyone understands it intellectually, but to internalize it is not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, because if you're approaching a doctor who was having a clinic, that's going to be very different than a mechanic
Correct.
who has his own shop on that, because there is a different mentality that comes with it, clientele and realities.
So one of the sort of recent things which, like, it's not a very a huge type of example, but like it's I found it significant enough. I was speaking with someone at a job corps at a job corps thing in New Jersey. The job corps organizations are like federally funded in the United States. They are mostly at state levels, and they take in students from disadvantaged parts of the population, try to give them a vocational education, and teach them some trade. So there are a lot of people, students who have had um, challenges in the family, drug issues, and stuff. So that's the type of, and they try to retool them and give them a sense of purpose, and then send them out and then get them jobs. So I was asking this lady, so what is and so I was talking to the woman who is in charge of community outreach in the Edison Job Corps. And one of the things which my assumption was that, like, one of their success criteria would be the placements that they have. Like, in order to get funding, they would tell their donors or wherever they get the grants from that we take in so many people and we place them. This is the percentage that we are able to place them.
Right,
So
and
placement,
we've justified our
our
existence by
existence,
basically
right?
putting them out in the
Correct,
workforce. So we've done something right. Yeah,
correct.
we've given them
and
skills.
that and that was my assumption, that like they would, so placement ratio would be the success criteria. And I just wanted to vet it and say, like, mentioned it, so this is what you obviously want. And she said, Shomo, no, what we really want is when we place someone in a job, whether that student stays in that job for at least 2 years or not. So they were looking, like, their success criteria was not placement, but they were saying that they were able to place the whoever they placed would have the ethics, work ethics of a person who would stick around and not be flaky. And that's a very different thing from just placement as a thing. So Edison Job Corps having that objective was not really something which I had been able to. I didn't see it coming. Um, and if I when I think of it, it makes sense, right? So similarly, like whenever we make some assumptions, and we make assumptions left and right all throughout the day, we don't realize that we make assumptions, right? At times assumptions are good things to have, make, because they get us through the day without having to justify. You don't get up in the morning and justify to yourself why you should brush your teeth, right? So you take it as a given thing, as something which you need to do and get along doing it, and that helps us. So even in business there are certain assumptions which see us through the day and through the period and everything. uh, but at most of the times, or a lot of times, when you are starting off a business, you also need to recognize the assumptions that you are making. So that's one thing which I feel that not all businesses are in the best position to do. Like, all business owners are not always in the best position to do by themselves. By definition, all of us have blind spots, and blind spots, like almost by definition, are things which we are not cognizant of. So there would be areas where we would not. So that's one thing which I think is a risk or a trap when you are setting up a business.
Yeah, and I think I was certainly guilty of that, that I thought that if I put out a shingle that I would be, with my experience and my background, that work would come. Like, I never thought it would be. I gained all my skills on marketing because I had to learn how to market. I certainly did not put it when I started as, and I was, I have very specific training. It's like 1,100 hours of direct supervision from the master coaches. Like, you don't get that with a degree. This is very intensive training. And so, yeah, my assumption was that, yeah, I should be able to, if I do it and I offer a quality service. Sorry, I just think back, just like how little I knew. So that was, yeah, there was an assumption that they made. Do you think that if people actually knew they were running on assumptions, they wouldn't actually go forward? They wouldn't actually start the business? Do you think if they
So
actually
there was this TED talk which I found very interesting, and the whole
a
thing
TED
was that
a TED talk?
a
Yeah,
TED talk,
yeah.
and the whole thing was based on, like, what do you do when you are in the wrong, right? So the question that was posed to the audience was that, imagine the last time where you were in the wrong. And this was not like a trivial thing, like whether you misread something or the not, like something which was serious. and uh, and uh, and then the question was that, like, what did you feel while you were in the wrong?
Mm.
And and the answer is that, like, while we are wrong about something, we feel we are right about that, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be doing that. We are convinced that that is the right thing to do, and therefore we do it. It just turns out later on that we were in the wrong, right?
Right.
So by ourselves, I think none of us can always spot where our errors are, or more, or it would be almost like a exception than a rule for us to spot where our errors were.
How
And
do you see this? Sorry for how do you go ahead, finish that thought, I'll wait.
so the other question, which in order to sort of, so that people can, to get people on the same page as me, I ask them, um, doctors are the best person to figure out what's wrong with the human physiology. Like, if you are sick, you would go to a doctor because they are the best people and the trained people and they with the experience. But how many doctors treat themselves? And the answer is almost zero, right? Like,
Right.
the doctors, but
Right.
again, they are not allowed to self-medicate for a reason. They
Right.
are too close to their subjects, and then that's true for everything. Like, even the consultant would need a consultant.
Right. Well, if we look at it this way, I no one would expect someone to be a Olympian if they didn't have a coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you could
Mm-hmm.
have all that raw talent and whatnot, but the question I was going to ask you is, do you see a difference between a blind side and a bias?
Yes. Um, a blind spot or being blindsided is not having considered the issue at all.
Okay.
And a bias is where you have considered the issue
Oh, right.
and you have a set of rules which push you to take decisions where you would be biased towards taking a you are you are more inclined towards a particular decision, and that's
Right.
where the bias is.
Right. So as I think I've told you, and I think everyone here, or not everyone, but most, well, you know, is I've recently secured a position as chief marketing officer for a company called Expanse AI. They're out of Ireland, and my job is to actually figure out how to sell, how to win the data scientists over, because data scientists are integral to the role, to because the business, the C-level person or the executive or whoever, the VP or the president or whatever, will say to the data scientist, is the software good? And because they don't understand it, right? And the data scientists will go yes or no. And what have they been doing? They've been saying no, because they think they're going to be out of work. They think our software is actually going to put them out of work. So my job has been to actually bring them over and figure out uh, how to leverage their belief systems. And one of the things I recently learned from the data scientists who developed the software is that data scientists believe they're impervious to bias. And
because they are supposedly because they are supposedly data driven.
that's right. That's right. And I'm also mindful of a few years ago, a friend of mine said that he didn't believe he was impacted by commercials. He didn't believe he was influenced by commercials. And under my breath, I said, "You're my perfect client." Someone that actually believes that they're impervious to basically messaging, you know, and on that. So it's one thing to suspect you have a bias, but it's another thing. Like to say you don't have biases is bias. It's a form of bias. You think actually it's not me on that and whatnot. But even how data scientists have to arrange tables, they're choosing, like if they're looking churn rate in a telecommunications company, they're looking at, are we looking at a 20 to 25-year-old or 20 to 30-year-old or whatever on that. So do you find that you ever have to clue people in that their blind sides or what's getting in their way or their biases are getting in their way?
It's seldom that seldom works.
Okay.
If I tell you that you have a bias, you would have a resistance to that. That I think the trick is to understand what the bias is and work with it,
Okay.
and see whether um, so if I know where I want my client to be, if I can somehow get my client to that, see that without actually challenging. So the moment I challenge someone, it it's an existential thing, right? You are even if it's a tiny bit of a thing, at times, see, there's no right answer, right? It doesn't work the same way for everyone all the
Right.
time.
Right.
Like and once you have developed the trust of someone, you can slip in suggestions and make statements that you can get away with. But till the time you are there, you never know how that person would respond to that statement.
Yeah, it's,
And
yeah, that makes sense because there was a friend of mine. He asked me to look at some branding, and it was only for my relationship with him that I was able to go, it's not good. And he thought it was fine. He thought it was absolutely fine. And it's just like I'm saying, I'll tell you why it's not fine. You have done this, 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 and this. You haven't been able to answer these questions. and on that. So yeah, and but he thought it was absolutely stellar what he did. So
So also like in my career, I have been always like, and this is more true in my corporate days. I was more comfortable with the CFO's office than with the CIO's office or the CTO's office.
okay,
And even though my most of the work that I have done from my PwC or I Cognizant days have come out from the CTO's or CIO's budget.
okay,
Um, and that means that like I perhaps have a better sense of how those people work,
mm,
the accountants work,
mm,
than I have perhaps because maybe because I would say something which would be considered to be challenging the the decisions of the CIO, and for the CFO it would be more like supporting their grievances, or what they would want out of
you
the whole thing. So
yeah, you're on their side and kind of
right,
behind them on that.
right,
So
right.
let's talk about Friday, and I do want to open up some questions because I could, I have no problem. We've had several of these long conversations before in the past, you and I, Shoumo, on this. Um, so you're giving a talk on Friday about the laws of business. Do you want to give us what some of those laws are, and not go into the detail, but just the 50,000 foot view of what people can expect on Friday?
So so the first thing which I would say is that like when I talk about like when you talk about laws, and even if you Google the word or the term business laws, you most of the time you come out with lists like with content like tax laws or whatever laws and stuff, right? So laws are like are almost like when you say laws, people hear law and order,
Yep.
which is more like regulations and code. uh, but in this context, what I am think the way I am talking about it is more like the natural laws. So like laws of gravity and laws, so laws of economics and stuff like that. Laws of economics and laws of natural laws are a bit different, a shade different.
Okay.
But even over there it is like uh, it is an aggregate of how human behavior and human needs and it perhaps even fundamentally goes down to things like the Maslow's hierarchy and stuff like that. So
Right.
but when I'm talking about like this Friday, when I am talking about laws, I'm so there are like no matter what the business does, there are some fundamental things that they have to do to in order to succeed. So
Regardless of any business.
correct,
Yeah.
and it is, and these are not and at one level these seem like the motherhood and the apple pie type of statements,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if you what I have realized is that most of us ignore chunks of these, right? So and so one of the things which so the laws are things like, if you need to sell something which people will buy, right? And why will people buy it? Because you're solving some problems or meeting an aspiration, right? So it's not always so one of the things which people say is that like if you find a problem large enough and then try to solve it, you will have a business around it. So and it's not, it is true, but it is not necessarily like the sufficient condition. It's necessary but not sufficient. So you can also solve an aspirational issue, and therefore people will buy that. So it's just not need. So it's a question of you are resolving something which people um, want or need, and that's I would call it like the resolution law. Then there is like people have to not only need it and want it, but they also need to buy it from you. So you just can't, you might be solving a huge problem, but if your so say you are solving a clean water problem for Africa, and 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 you come out with a cost, and then they don't have the money to buy it. So you can't really market it. Like you have to, people need to buy that. Like people would very very recently, there was a business, that startup which closed down because of I believe this marketability stage. Like they 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 were issuing, they had a product that people wanted, or it solved something, but there weren't too many people who were really quote unquote buying it. And so they couldn't get to that necessary level, and they had to close down. And then if you do this, if you meet both these two, then also you have to do it, for do enough of it. Like you can't have a one-off sale, or three projects a year, when you need say 100 projects a year. And it's not only a year, but you need that revenue year on year. So there's a sustainability of that business, and a lot of times we also forget about that, saying that yes, there is, people will, we are solving something, therefore people will buy. Okay, do people buy? And at times it is yes, at times it is no. And even when they buy, do they buy enough of it? Perhaps the answer is yes, but then do they buy enough of it for enough number of years? Like if it is a novelty item, is it, if it is an as seen on TV item,
Hmm.
then you can't really make a business out of it. Your business perhaps then is each year you have to come out with 20 novelty items, and then you have to figure out whether it's a feasible type of a business or not. Uh, so that's, these are the three basic type of things. And then as a add-on to this, you also have to be adaptable. If you want to do this enough number of years, and then Toys R Us went out of business. They were around, like they were in the business environment for a long while, and then um, we can say that like we blame it on Amazon, but is that the real issue why they went out of business? Sears going slowly going out of business.
Right.
And I remember when they bought Kmart, I thought like this was the first step for them to go out of business.
Really?
And yeah, it
How
was,
how come? How come?
because Kmart was in trouble at that time. They bought over, and the Kmart and the Sears business models and everything was different. Like the customer segment was different. So it was like almost like they could not. These were not two compatible businesses. So it was almost like Sears was investing in another business.
Okay.
And did the management team have the experience of managing that other business? So Kmart is all, you won't find an associate selling, hanging around, trying to sell you an appliance in a Kmart, like you
Right.
would have at a Sears.
Right.
So and everything is very different from a Kmart and a Sears. um, and it's just not like the perception that Walmart is cheap. They are cheap because they have put together certain processes. They have put together certain, their messaging is to a certain customer segment. They have a business model which is different from Sam's, or a BJ's, or one of the something else, right?
Right.
Trader Joe's, or whatever. And so like adaptability to, and when I say it has to be adaptable, there are business trends going on, there are technology trends going on. There are various types of things happening in the market, like which they need to be cognizant of. And if they don't, then they go out of business.
It's interesting because you're talking about there has to be a need that people are going to pay for, or that their money's going to pay for. So there's a company I was speaking with the president. Oh God, 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, but they were doing geothermal heating, and it was here in the province of Alberta, um, and I was saying to him, this is great. Like, when can we see this everywhere? And he goes, yeah, well, yeah, that'd be good, but it costs a couple $1 million to put the hole in the ground to be able to get to it and to have it done right. And it has all these conditions. There has to be this water that is actually in the water table that you can heat up and do this kind of stuff. And it's just like, yeah, we're doing because the government has given us the money for it, but if it's going to cost him, for some reason $5 million comes to mind. I don't know why that is, but it was a lot of money just to drill the hole, let alone the infrastructure, everything on that. So you could have, yes, all this, but it's not scalable because of they haven't found the technology. And something this province does really well is we know how to drill holes in the ground, because we know how to drill for the pipeline, the oil industry, right? We know how to drill down, we know how to drill sideways, we know how to, go into other things like that. We have that all really, so we're experts in drilling in deep drilling, but still it's not scalable, and it's a need we all have, because right now it is minus 12 Fahrenheit Celsius. So you guys can convert what that works into. I don't know the Fahrenheit on that. So there has to be scalable and whatnot, or it has to be doable, and it could be the best thing. But if it's prohibitive in its price, it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
I'm
So
gonna. Yeah.
here's another thing which I wanted to quickly share.
Please do.
And I think you.
Oh, I need to give you a screen. Okay,
yeah,
1 second.
Yeah. There's, even though I'm not going to, this is not going to be included in this Friday, but I was playing around with this a few weeks, a few days back, and I just wanted to show you this.
Okay.
So when you're talking about like the same thing as the need, want, and buy things of if you want to sell, if you have products or offerings, and I was playing around with the need, want, buy thing. So if it is in the middle part, like the sweet spot is where all of these
The
overlap,
intersection of all three.
right? But there are sections where people will buy stuff which they neither need nor want. um, Chamber of Commerce, like if they are hobbies,
Okay.
or they are mostly like snake oil type of stuff,
Right.
then
Like
they will,
like a pet rock, buying a
like
pet
a pet,
rock.
right. So there are businesses which would survive for a bit on that, and then so there are these things which I thought like was interesting to play around with this, to see, and there might be stuff like which they need and want, but they are not in a mode to buy. So that's the growth potential. Like, so it's if you if they can find the budget, if you can help them with the pricing and the thing, then they would most likely eventually buy this also. So anyway, I just wanted to share that quickly.
I want to actually give our audience members an opportunity to ask some questions, because I've got a page full. But would Chris, John, Deb, do you guys have questions for Shoumo?
I'll go. I unfortunately had a couple interruptions during the thing, so I might have missed some of the answers. But one of my questions: what is your core business?
I'm a business consultant who helps businesses grow. So that's the simplest way of I. So your definition of, like, each business has the definition of growth is, like, for some businesses it might be more top line, some businesses it's profitability, for some businesses is another product line. And the approach that I take is that of a business model approach, so which is like look at the fundamental of the business from ground up, And for business modeling, I use techniques which are used um, a lot of times by Silicon Valley startups, to even state departments um, and government organizations and stuff. So it's a very fundamental model, and it goes deep into. It's almost like an accordion. Like it's a framework which fills out when you depending on what the requirement is. Uh,
So what would be
so
the typical client size for you?
so the I have worked one of the so I have worked with Main Street. Uh, I wouldn't say Main Street businesses, even though yes, I have worked with Main Street businesses, but I have worked with um, downtown merchants associations, and so at a aggregate of Main Street levels. I have worked for manufacturing. So I don't do very well in terms of how much revenue do they have or what their valuation is. My focus more is that what is the complexity of their business and what the challenge is. As of now, I'm at a stage where you have heard, like I am still in my journey of challenging my assumptions and my blind spots. So people have, I most likely have made a change where I have perhaps I'm working with too much with the mom and pops, and I have been advised to move out of that segment to go to a more of a mid-level type of a thing. And I have worked with organizations like someone who has um, is like the person who manages all the digital assets of like Ashley Furniture type of a company. So they all the photographs. So it's a family, say a family run furniture or business, which would have a lot of offers coming out, a lot of models coming out. So the maintaining those photographs and stuff is a quite a complicated stuff for them, like creating them, storing them, retrieving them, putting them through the approval process. So someone who wanted to get beyond, find more clients, they had a business like comparable to Ashley Furniture's, so they wanted to get into to find more clients. So for them the growth was for adding on a couple of more such clients. I'm working with someone who prints, so anything prints on flexible surfaces. So could be a label on, say, the clamshell of a Shoprite muffin, that the clamshell packing, the wrapper which goes around it, to a label on the bottle, to maybe a muffin sold at Starbucks. So anything on a flexible service is something which this guy does. So he is looking to grow his business in terms of getting more clients, adding more capacity, and so that's another person that I would work with. And a lot of cases, what happens is that my work ends up in a growth plan which needs funding, so growth funding, and which a lot of times is SBA loans. So I work with another person who is a SBA loan advisor and has been a banker for 27 years. And that's a partnership which we have. So if he has like a franchisor, a franchise, someone who owns, is setting up a franchise and looking to add franchisees. So consultation with him helps him to make the business more modular and stuff like that. And when I get someone who is, say, a restaurant owner who is moving in town, needs funding, say $500,000 or something like that, uh, could be I would work with refer here. and work with that person to also have the basic business plan and stuff ready.
Would you work with like a nonprofit?
The challenge is the
You have no money.
funding, right? Like is the getting paid part of it. But to be more specific, when I work with businesses, for-profit businesses, I use a framework called Business Model Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And the first cousin to that framework is named Mission Model Canvas, where customers are replaced with beneficiaries and revenue is replaced with impact. And then it is, again, I build up the whole thing from groundwork. What are the challenges? Like, is fundraising a challenge? Is volunteer recruitment a challenge? Is getting a board a challenge? Like, what is the challenge? And therefore, so there might be certain challenges which I am not the best person to work with. Like there, I could set fundraising strategy, but I may not be the best person to run the fundraising event. Like that might be an event manager that I should bring in. So I'm very honest and open and transparent to share what my limitations are and where I feel I could add value. And at the end of the day, the clients. So the other day, for example, there was someone who came to me, and it would have been a nonprofit, and she was thinking she needed an app and therefore a business plan. And then I told her that you would not be in a position even to write a business plan for at least a year because you really don't know what you are aiming at. So instead of paying me to write that business plan, you need to get someone who will guide you through this process. And I could be that person if you want to hire me for that. But that's if I try to sell something to someone who what they don't really need at that time, that project is going to fall through. It's not going to work.
Right.
Which is the whole reason why you got out of corporate in the first place,
Right.
right?
Right. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, because I don't think you do soulless work. So
Yeah, it's find it very difficult. Yes, Chris.
Um, I think the last part between uh, Luke and Shoumo, I'm not sure if I completely follow it about. I think you're Shoumo's talking about, is it selling something that the person doesn't need, or is it about doing the wrong thing, or?
1 second, Chris. You're kind of muffled. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
So the need want thing, Chris, is yes, if the person, like the person might want something, right? And if a client tries paying you to do something, um, it's sort of foolish not to take the money and do that, right? But at the same time, if the client is clear as to what the outcome that the client is looking for. So if the client understands what the outcome is and paying you to do something to reach that outcome, and you know that even if you do that work, that outcome will not happen, then you are only taking money to earn a bad name for yourself. Like even as a business sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Forget the ethics and stuff like that. So each client that we take on, we need to make sure that like there has to be a referenceable client. Like you would need to be able to refer another prospect to the client, and that client should say that yes, go and work with this person.
Right. So it's seeing the long view. It's seeing the bigger picture,
Correct.
not just that kind of
Correct.
immediate. And can you leverage that in the future if you
Right.
have on that? And if it's not, then they best pay you a lot of money.
And
Right.
I don't.
Right.
I also didn't quite understand what this has to do with the big companies that I think Luke and Shlomo were talking about. This has something to do with the big companies. I didn't really understand it.
You
As
want
to why he's no longer wanting to work with big companies, or
Just the relationship between, I think, between what Shoumo said about, I think what Shoumo said about not, about the problem with something the client wants but does not, but does not need for to reach the right outcome, and what this has to do with the, with Shoumo's experience with some of these larger
so
corporations.
I right. So it's that, like, these are principles which have been. So earlier I was talking about my journey, right? And but even in if I take these principles and apply them to larger corporate, like jobs in done in larger corporates, um, often you would have clients who hire, like, I have been in positions where I have been hired to do something as a Pricewaterhouse consultant, and I know that where the path that the client is going down is not going to get them the results that they want. So and I have my boss telling me that just keep your head down and do this job, right? So then there becomes this whole thing of that, do I just do this because the client is paying me to do it, or do I also look beyond my tenure in this project, because I'll be gone the next day once the my job is done, and I wouldn't have to be answerable to in a larger organization. I personally, individually, would not be answerable to the outcome if that was not my job description, and in most cases it is not. So the principles which I was saying for the clients I work with now are equally valid in larger organizations. But when we were talking about larger organizations, I think the question was that, like, the what brought me to this position, and what the journey was.
that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We have 11 minutes. I actually want to talk now about what webinars I have coming up. So I'm just going to share my screen and just to do this infomercial. Ta-da. So the upcoming webinars that I have for the next month are these. Tomorrow, I have Ageism, Navigating the Potential Minefield. And as soon as there it is. Okay, just a bit of a delay on what you guys are seeing. And ageism is really, this webinar is really about one simple concept, and that is that if people can't, and we're talking about ageism of people, or for individuals who are like north of 50 type of idea, and if you're applying for work and all they can see is your age, then you have to give them reason to see past the ageism. You have to give them reason to see what you bring to the table and how to position yourself. So I talk about what age, how we sometimes find ourselves in ageism, and also some of the things that you can do to stay out of it. So this is something, if you're finding ageism is an issue, please come check out this webinar tomorrow. On Wednesdays, we have the Connect and Learn networking event, and this is likely going to be carried on to the new year. Colin Christopher and I are doing this. He's my co-host, and it's just a place where we teach. There's a teaching component where we actually talk about how to network in the age of online marketing. I'm sorry, not online groups and meeting virtually. And we talk about the importance of being able to look at the camera, how do we have to show up, how you need more energy, and then everyone gets to pitch, and then the group gives feedback to it. We've done 2 of them, and it's actually becoming one of the highlights of my week, quite frankly. So that's happening on Wednesday night. Then on Thursday, we have Becoming a Subject Matter Expert, position yourself as an expert and industry leader to potential employers. And in this, I offer 20 different strategies on how to position yourself as an expert in the market. So if you're looking on how to distinguish yourself, or how to show what you do different, or what expertise you have, you might want to check out this webinar. And then we move on to Widen Your Gaze Fridays, and this is where you have this handsome gentleman here. There it is, business laws, what every owner should know about and follow. So this is happening this Friday, and Shoumo will be giving this talk on this Friday on that. Then Monday we have the Here to There show, which is actually it's going to be a special edition. We're just still working on the cover art, but it's going to be a Christmas edition, and I'm looking forward to doing that. We're actually going to have it looks like a 11-piece band playing in on for three different songs at least. How we're going to coordinate this, I'm not sure. 11 or 14-piece band. It's a Latino band, and they are outstanding. So come check that out, and hopefully we won't fall on our face. Then the next day, the second last webinar for the actual 2020 is Being Infused, Getting Out of Your Own Ways. And this is on December 22nd, and it's the last one right before Christmas. And it's the do's and don'ts of video interviewing. And I'm not talking about what to say in the interview. I'm talking about how to show up so that you actually have success on that. So we talk about hardware considerations, software considerations, things like virtual backgrounds, microphones, webcams, how to not give a bad impression so that you're able to get to that next level in your job search process. And then the last one of the year is Communication Fundamentals, and it is on December 29th. And this is one of my more recent webinars where I think I've done this maybe 6 times, and I really enjoy the content. And it is an emotional-based approach. And whereas that different from a cognitive-based approach is that if you change the way you feel, you'll change the way you think. That's the emotional based approach. Whereas cognition is change the way you think and you'll change the way you feel. And for those of you those psychologists out there who's going to go, that's not what it is, I'm just giving a wide paintbrush. I know that's not totally accurate, but that's generally the difference. So we look at feeling identification, the importance of it. I also offer a feedback model that you can take and work to improve feedback with people. Then we're looking at the new year, and this is on January 5th because we've gone through the Christmas and New Year's, and we have dealing with difficult interview questions. And this is all those questions that people hate answering. Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What critical feedback do you always receive? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your salary expectations? I cover all that. And if you have some questions that interviews that you don't know what they're asking for, please bring them and try and stump me. That would be kind of fun. I will tell you, I won't necessarily tell you exactly why those questions are being asked, but I can tell you probably what they're looking for on that. So please come check that out. It's the first webinar of 2021. I can actually say now I'm going into my 2nd year of this. Then we have on January 7th, defining your ideal client, customer avatar. And it really is about how do you define and how do you really identify who that ideal customer is. So we either look at a business to business model, not model, but is business to business or business to consumer. So come check that out. And then I don't have the copy for Widen Your Gaze yet for that, so that'll be coming the next day. And then we have the Here to There show, which happens every Monday. And then on Tuesday, January 12th, we have how to develop a compelling elevator pitch, part 1, the value proposition. So in this, I talk about the importance of knowing your value proposition. What is the value proposition, and where do you inject it in your elevator pitch, and where does that come in? And that comes in part 2, which is going to be creating meaningful connections. And so this is where we look at what you learned about your value proposition and then where that fits in with your elevator pitch. We also look at things like values and principles that also play into your elevator pitch. Then that's that. So that's all the sharing I have for that. And we have a few more minutes. Is there more questions for Shoumo that you guys would like to ask? Deb, do you have a question? I put you on the spot.
Is there anything else for elevator pitches?
Is there anything else for elevator pitches?
Luke?
I'm not understanding your question, Chris. What have I forgotten? What have I missed?
I saw a piece of paper. There's a flyer, a piece of paper at the end of the booklet.
Oh, you're talking about my elevator pitch diagnostic?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a service I offer. I generally don't mention that today, but since you
Oh.
asked, yeah, it's basically it's no, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you, because I don't want to look like I'm too self-serving, but I have an elevator pitch diagnostic, and it is 90 minutes with me, and I'm currently running it for $49 USD. A few people say, "Can I pay in Canadian?" And go, "No, you can't, because it's a hell of a deal." And yeah, so it's just basically if you want to ask questions about your elevator pitch, your um, uh, looking for work, job search, how to position yourself in the market, anything about executive coaching, I will answer all those questions. And I will shorten your learning curve drastically, because that's what I do. I have this ability to really focus in and get down to it. So yeah, that's something that I offer. And all you have to do is send me an email, letting me know you're interested, and then we go from there. You can go through my website, but it's listed there for $197, and the 97 or the $49 rate is for people that attend my webinars on that. So it's a bit different. Thanks, Chris, for asking. I appreciate it not looking like I'm being too self-serving here. Any last questions before we wrap up today's installment of the Here to There show?
I'm just interesting when you were at PwC, and it was all about billable. I was at Arthur Anderson for a while.
I noticed that on your profile. Yes.
Yeah. And so I was just wondering how prevalent you felt that that pressure to be billable, right? Just shut up and be billable. That's all we care about, right? How prevalent was that at PwC?
So when I was with PwC, like I found it much more like the system was so that like I could work with the system and the system would work with me, than when I was with Cognizant. Like what I felt was in the Cognizant framework, or even like when like utilization is like a homogeneous impersonal number. Like it's and I think a part of that is attributable to whether the it's a public company or not, like whether the financials are being reported on Wall Street or not. So if it is Wall Street reporting that people have to take care of, then it is much more like there it cannot be, there aren't too many ways of interpreting it or whatever. But in my PwC life, like it was, I had a much more a lot of latitude of how I like, as long as I would know my limits and what I could commit to, and so it was not only being billable, but the pressure was also being profitable and stuff like that. But at the same time, I could also demand a lot of things because of, again, the nature being a partnership firm environment, and it allowed a lot of the pressures to be there were a lot of layers and mechanisms for the whole thing to be absorbed. Like it did feel we were in it together, and it was much more, yes, I'm also part of the decision making process. But in a corporate environment, I didn't really have that authority or that much say in where, especially when I was in IBM. Like in IBM, the charge out rates and everything was handed down. Like so if I wanted an exception on a discount on the charge out rates that we were prescribed, so beyond a certain level, I would have to go to, I was in India, so I had to go to Singapore for an approval. Beyond that, it had to go to Tokyo for an approval. Beyond that, it would come to the US for an approval. So there were all these, it was a very impartial type of a thing. Like your contribution gets thrown into a huge cauldron and there is nothing in it after that. So I think in Arthur Anderson versus Accenture, there were these type of things also, and I I I, I really don't know. I haven't been in I haven't been in that firm, or haven't spoken enough with enough people in that firm to have a sense.
Right.
Well,
Well, thank
I
you very
know.
much. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
John.
no, I was just gonna just address the office that I was with at Arthur Anderson was very straight and by the rules, right?
Mm, mm,
You wanted to provide value, and you were expected to provide value because that's their reputation, you
mhm,
know.
mhm, mhm. So I
And
think there was a lot of warm fuzzy things in earlier, in like the pre-Enron days of PW, CNL, Deloitte. There were a lot of things which were, I don't really know about the KPMG EY cultures, but like these three, there were a bit of warm fuzzy things which were allowed to creep in at times. Like it wasn't totally like till the time the shit hit the hit the roof or the fan.
well, and and,
You-
and that's the interesting thing is you can have a great firm, but a couple bad apples that
Yeah.
upset the chart. Like I was very upset when I heard what had happened with the Enron, you
Correct,
know,
correct. And
because
that sent a ripple effect. Not only like it was not only localized on the Arthur Anderson, the Accenture or whatever, but it had a ripple effect on like Deloitte was the only organization that held off the pressures, right? Even though they did go in for a lot of formal separation within the firm, but most of the other firms like ENY, KPMG, like all of them did, like PwC split and sold off their management consulting thing to IBM, and so did Bearing Point happened, they went bankrupt. So a lot of those things, that did send off a ripple effect throughout the whole industry.
right.
On that note, I'm going to bring this to an end because I do have to get something else to go going here. I'm sorry, John. I didn't give you enough time to answer your questions. I apologize for that.
That's okay. We
Yeah.
connected. We'll
Yeah.
be in touch.
Okay.
We'll follow up.
Yeah. One of my things is to go for a walk every day, and it's just like there's about an hour and 10 minutes left of late before it gets dark. So I'm gonna call this to an end. And thank you very much for being here, Shoumo. Thank you so much for
No problem.
being interviewed. And please come on Friday. Come check it out
Sure.
and hear some of those tried and true business laws. On that note, as I always say, you don't have to leave your house, but you can stay in this room. Shoma, I'm just going to get you to hang on, and you guys take care. And